One of the things I've learned and started to realize is that our own personal struggles as players, as athletes, they seem to carry into our coaching. So like for me, I struggled with emotional control. I had this like horrible temper as a player. So really it's no surprise that I struggle with that as a coach. If you struggle with self-doubt as a player, you probably will struggle with self-doubt as a coach. If you have a big ego as a player, you might struggle with ego as a coach. If you're not a great leader as a player, chances are you might struggle with leadership as a coach. I think you get the idea. Today we've got this incredible coach, this leader, and more importantly, a person on the podcast. His name's Billy Armstrong, and he's the head basketball coach at Bergen Catholic High School in New Jersey. He just won another state championship this season, even after losing their best player and one of the top point guards in the country to a season-ending injury. In the second part of our interview with Billy, we're going to unpack that incredible story of how he and his team were able to overcome a lot of adversity. However, today's episode, it's about his journey as a player, and it's a fantastic story with some really funny parts as well as some sad parts. But I think the point of it comes back to what I was just talking about. The things that we carry with ourselves as a person, life setbacks and our own personal struggles, they don't just leave you, when you transition into coaching. And Billy's story is a great example of that. A lot of awareness and a lot of effort to maybe overcome some of those challenges on Billy's part. Welcome to the Coaching Culture Podcast. My name is JP Nurbin, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host Nate Sanderson. Every episode, we talk about how to grow as a leader and build our culture. We like to get practical, not just theoretical. And I will say today's episode is probably a little bit more about Billy's story, and next episode is where we start to get into the meat and potatoes of his coaching. Also, it's worth mentioning that Billy is a TOC community coach. What's that mean? It means that he's worked with me in my coaching and mentorship program. So obviously he's highly invested in his own growth and development, and he works hard to be intentional as a leader. If you'd like to learn more about our mentorship and coaching program, go on over to tocculture.com. You can also subscribe to the newsletter to get the notes to this podcast and weekly thoughts on leadership and culture building. Now let's get into today's interview. All right, Billy, we are pumped to have you on the podcast today, and we're going to dive deep into your journey as a coach over the years and how you've built this exceptional culture at Bergen Catholic High School. But we want to start with kind of one of my favorite, stories or experiences of you, which is, your journey as a player from, high school basketball in New Jersey to Davidson and then into pros in Europe. So I was kind of hoping we could start with there, just kind of go down a little memory lane for you, and you could kind of share your journey there as a player, because it really is extraordinary. And I think it actually sets the stage for some of the ways that you coach. It definitely impacts the ways that you coach. So,
I mean, to a lot of, it was kind of typical when I first started out, just like young, just playing all the different sports and stuff. And, I get to Bergen Catholic, and there's this culture of excellence at the school as a whole, not just the athletic teams, but academically. And so I get submerged in this culture. I come from a town that's a local town that's close. I kind of get submerged in this culture. To give you an idea, as a ninth grader, I'm a left-handed point guard that couldn't dribble with his right hand. So that kind of gives you an idea. I thought I was a pretty good player in my town and everything, and in CYO basketball that was big at that time in New Jersey. So I get here, and they have 140 kids that try out for the Bergen Catholic freshman team. And our varsity coach comes into the freshman tryouts, and I think he just handed a list of 12 names to like the freshman coach at the time. So I want to say like 10 out of the 12 names were already like decided prior to even like coming to the tryouts, I think. But so I was lucky to be one of the 12 guys on that list. I have no idea how. But I went through my freshman year, and it was a very rocky year. I was like the eighth, ninth man for most of the season. A couple games where I started or whatever, but I was really the eighth or ninth man throughout that season. But when the season was over, that's kind of when it all started for me. And I don't really know. I think part of it is just being submerged in this culture. There was some upperclassmen that got Division I scholarships. So just seeing, how good they were and seeing our varsity games and stuff. So I honestly, after the season was over, I don't know exactly why, but I just became obsessed with the game of basketball and like getting better. And that's kind of really where it all started. And when I say obsessed, it's like my mom and dad thought I had psychological problems. Like my mom was actually really nervous. She thought she would tell my dad, like, we got a psycho on our hands here. Like this kid is nuts. And she was like, I think genuinely worried because I'd be doing like defensive slides in my driveway at like 1 o'clock in the morning, holding bricks in my hand. So my neighbors would just be like peeking out the windows for those that were up. And it's just like, what is this kid doing? But I really, really did become obsessed. And I don't want to bore you with all the details of the story. And I always say the oak tree doesn't grow overnight. It does take time. There's a process to it. So long story short, from my freshman year, by the time I was a junior, I had 12 Division I scholarship offers. I think my high school coach, Coach Donfield, who was a second dad to me in a lot of ways and just a superhuman being, um, I think he thought a new kid had transferred into the school, honestly. My sophomore year, I did play on the JV team, and I did start on the JV team, and that was one of the best things that could have ever happened to me. And then I made my varsity team as a junior. So, and then from there, it was, I lived out all the high school dreams that kids have. Won a state championship, got the Division I scholarship, which wasn't the goal for me. Like I really didn't even think about any of those things. It was just me practicing every day. I had like this whole thing where after practice, I'd go home and every day for 4 years, I'd be in my basement. We had a very small basement, and I was doing ball handling drills around the washer and dryer, driving my mom in nuts, like, dribbling the ball downstairs. So that was like, it was like literally 2 hours a day after practice. I went home and did that. And I figured things out of like how to get better. And there was like this parking garage to where I lived, and we lived in like this 2-family house. So I did so many ball handling drills in that parking garage because it never rained in the parking garage. It wasn't the safest thing, and I wouldn't encourage like players to do it, like doing 2-ball dribbling drills around cars darting in and out. But I just became obsessed with getting better and just finding a way to improve, and I didn't allow anything to stop me from doing the workouts that I had assigned for that day. And I had a whole list of them, So
Hearing this story, there's some new things I'm learning, and now some of your, interesting quirks as a coach are starting to make a lot more sense to me right now. But I think you mentioned, I believe it was Coach Donfield was his name.
That was my high school coach. Yeah.
And you said extraordinary human being. I'm just curious, what made him extraordinary for you, and how did that impact you as a player and your motivation and inspiration? Because I think, maybe it played some sort of factor there in creating that drive,
Yeah. This is going to sound really weird, but I think what made him a really good basketball coach is that he knew nothing about basketball. Like not that he knew like nothing, but it was he coached here forever, and I don't know if he could have like taught me how to shoot a layup. I got to be honest with you. Like he was pretty good with like scouting, and he was really good with like who to play and not to play. But it wasn't that. At times we felt like my teammates, we would kind of joke around about it. Like we were kind of like, we would come out of timeouts and it's like, I would just pick a play to run. Like he really kind of like didn't really teach us all the basketball stuff because he was a brilliant man. Like he had an academic scholarship in high school. Like he was a English teacher. Like he tutored us all in SATs, getting us prepared for that. Like he was brilliant, like really brilliant person. And kind of got the job here, I think, because he was just in line to get it and he loved it. So I think because he didn't know as much about the game of basketball from like I got to Davidson, and for my first 2 years I didn't play at all because I couldn't tell you what a closeout was. I didn't know what a cover down was. Like I'm just like Coach Mckillop is using these terms, and I'm like, what the hell is this guy talking about? It was just like this was insane, and that's one of the things that drives me in coaching, honestly. But so I think he just cared so much about us. And he just did all of the other things outside of the actual X's and O's and the game of basketball. Like he would open the gym for us, and we'd have open gym anytime anybody wanted it. So it was all of those things. I didn't need it, but we had, a lot of kids that went on to Division III schools, and he would make the kid he would drive the kid up to RPI, Rensselaer, up in upstate New York to go meet a D3 coach. And he'd make sure, the kid would wear, a certain sneakers that made him look taller. And he would layer like different clothes so he looked like bigger and a little more jacked. So he would do these kind of things that was really, and he got kids into schools and stuff. So because of that, we knew just how much he cared about us, and he would do absolutely anything for us, more so off the court. So that's why we all loved him. We played as hard as we could for him, even though they didn't know necessarily we had the best X's and O's. But we won a lot because we just, he cared for us and we cared for each other.
Yeah, no, I love that. And the level of the care, and it's definitely had an impact on you as a coach. Now you end up getting to Davidson, and you kind of already alluded to that being a pretty challenging experience.
Yeah, the first thing about Davidson, the reason why I went there, and I try to this is the thing I try to, I'm fortunate to have a lot of good players. I get a lot of good players here, and they play at all different levels, Division 1, 2, and 3. So I really try to emphasize with them. I don't really get involved with their recruiting as much, but I really try to emphasize with them. I'm here for them for whatever they need, and then try to make your decision based on people as best you possibly can, because it's a sales job, and you're going to show up, and they're going to have a 30,000 seat arena, and they're going to show you the fancy buildings and the fancy facilities and all of those things. And I didn't know this at the time, but the guy that's recruiting you is not the actual coach that you're going to play for, and that's in a lot of ways, and I didn't know that. So but I went to Davidson and I made that decision based on the people. Coach Mckillop was a New York guy. He grew up in Queens. I just kind of related to him. I really liked their assistant coaches and their staff. And, and my theory held water. Like when I got to my first practice at Davidson and he starts yelling at me and I'm like, where's the guy that recruited me and told me how great I was and all these other things? Because this is not that guy. So, but yeah, it was, at the time, I thought it was about playing basketball, me as a player, but it was really just a stop on my journey for what I believe was my real calling in life, was to become a coach or a teacher of young people. So getting the opportunity of all the schools in the country that I could have gone to or different places, that was the place for me. And that it really worked out because the bigger picture, I got to play for a Hall of Fame coach, but I really got to play for a Hall of Fame person. I didn't feel it at the time or whatever, but I got to Davidson. Like I said, I was clueless. I didn't know the terminology of basketball, and because of it, I struggled. And I played about 6 minutes a game my first 2 years. And then I had an unbelievable meeting with Coach Mckillop for lunch one day, and I don't think this is what he was trying to do, but I really struggled there academically because it was over my head academically. Like I leveraged basketball. I wonder what Nate's thinking right now, because we really never met, and now he's hearing all these crazy stories and academically challenged, athletically challenged, a psycho doing drills, and he's probably wondering why JP has me on this podcast or whatever. But so I had this meeting my sophomore year, and it was in the lunchroom there, and basically Coach was helping me. He said, we can get you at some other schools, Fairfield, Manhattan, different schools that had interest in me, because it might have just been more of a challenge for me academically. So, but I remember leaving that meeting, and it was like, this guy wants that scholarship back, and over my dead body, will he ever get this scholarship back? So I went on, I had like a 1.3, and then from that point on, I had like a 3.6, 3.7. I didn't do well academically because I wasn't playing basketball, and I identify with myself as being a basketball player. So because of that, the other areas of my life suffered. I didn't do my schoolwork. That's the long and short of it. But then little by little, my junior and senior year, I got better and better, and really, got to be a huge impact on a team for 2 years, and went to the NCAA tournament and all of those things or whatever. And I think in the process of it, became one of Coach Mckillop's favorite players, just because I just refused. I was kind of like that mutt dog, like that just would bite you and would not let go, and you keep trying to kick him off, and I just would not give the scholarship back. And no matter what kind of went on, I wouldn't like quit and stuff. And I think that relentlessness, started from me being the ninth man on the freshman team, and everybody thought I sucked, to be honest with you.
Billy, I want to ask you this. We've had some different coaches on here, and quite frankly, most coaches played, certainly through high school and often beyond that before transitioning into the coaching realm, but not all, and certainly those that have done it for different reasons. So, for you, this journey of kind of being the mutt dog that wouldn't let go and working his way all the way up to Division I and eventually playing professionally in Europe, and then transitioning to coaching. What was it for you that really drew you to coaching after your playing career?
I think there's a lot of things, but one thing that jumps out is that I didn't want anybody else to go through what I went through my first 2 years at Davidson College. I didn't want some kid to step on a campus and was a good enough high school basketball player to get recruited to play at a college, and then get there and just be totally lost. That was a driving force for me. So it was like, how can I help kids? And it didn't matter what level. It could be a junior college level. I just didn't want kids to go through that experience that I went through. because it really affected me. Because like I said, at that time, I identified myself as, a basketball player. And, I grew up with very humble beginnings. My dad was a truck driver. We didn't really have much. I moved about 14 different times, different towns by the time I was in sixth grade. So I grew up in an area where we didn't have money, but I lived in a very affluent area. It sounds like kind of weird, but I lived in northern Bergen County in this two-family house, multiple two-family houses at different places. So I always kind of had this inferiority complex that I grew up with that I didn't really know about. And then as I got better at basketball, it was a way for me to show everybody in the rich town, in the rich area, that, hey, I'm somebody too, even though I basically wore the same sweater to school at Bergen Catholic for 4 years because I just didn't have any other ones. Um, so there was the getting back to your question, Nate, like a part of the driving force was just trying to help kids not go through some of the experiences that I went through, particularly stepping on a college campus where I was just totally clueless.
I'm curious about that. When you talk about that experience, and I think a lot of times, whether it's teachers or coaches, we get into the industry, so to speak, either because we want to recreate an experience that was life changing for us, or you'll talk to teachers that say, I had the worst teacher here and I knew I could do it better. Or I wanted kids to have a different experience in English or social studies or what have you. But then taking that motivation, how has it shaped what you actually do with your players? I mean, you mentioned that you're working with players that are eventually going to play at that level, but what have you tried to do to make sure that your players don't have that kind of experience?
Yeah, it's the funny thing about it. It's that I don't want them to have that experience. Those experiences that we have in life, and this one in particular, it's like this weird thing because I got into coaching because I don't want kids to have that experience, but like I needed that experience. Like I needed to go through that. I needed to go kind of through the rain and the storm and all of that stuff. Because that's what drove me to go on and become really successful academically and athletically at Davidson for like 2 years. So it is kind of this weird thing. But as far as like the players that I have now, I didn't start out being a high school coach. I started out like running my own kind of youth basketball organization and giving back to like the kids in Bergen County. So it really started. I wanted the kids not to go through that experience. I also wanted kids to understand and know that you don't have to be. You can come from Bergen County, which is a suburban county, and become a really good basketball player. You don't have to be some inner city kid. You don't have to be 6'11". You don't have to jump out of the gym. You don't have to be this child phenom or any of that stuff. So those are the two reasons why I kind of got into like the coaching part. I really just went back to where I grew up, and I just wanted other kids in Bergen County to be like, yeah, you don't jump very high. You're not very fast and all those other kind of things. But man, if you really commit to this, you can do some things that would go beyond your wildest dreams. You just have to commit and kind of live with that basketball or whatever. So my everyday conversations from when I started my business to how I run my summer camps to all of those things, it's really just all that character building stuff that I went through in my own personal life that I just keep giving to all the kids I work with, whether it's a third grader at my clinic or it's some varsity kid that's going to get a high major Division I scholarship. All the information is all the same. So I just really try to help them. Which I think is my number one job as a coach, and any coach's job is to feed their minds.
You've got some really interesting ways that you feed your players' minds, and I want to unpack that in a little bit. But there's one other part of your story I just want to unpack really quickly. Your story as a player, and that's when you kind of after Davidson, because I think that's a challenging time for a lot of people. And you talked a lot about your identity being so tied up in basketball, and we're going to unpack that from a coaching perspective later. But just, you finished at Davidson and, what was next for you and how did you kind of know what step to take there?
Yeah, the step was knowing what to do is easy because like I was going to play. Like there was no other way. Nothing was going to stop me from. I'm going to continue playing basketball because I really felt like by the time I was a senior at Davidson, because I was kind of like this late bloomer too. Like I wasn't physically like strong and stuff, so I was very late bloomer. And I started to physically, by my senior year at Davidson, started to kind of grow into becoming a man, so to speak. So, if you saw me as a sophomore at Davidson, I looked like I was 15 years old. And if you ask Coach Mckillop, he'll tell you I played like a 15-year-old probably as a sophomore there. So, there was this level of confidence where it was like, man, I feel like I'm just starting to get going here, and I'm just starting to kind of blossom and stuff. So there was no question I was going to play. The problem was I was a role player at Davidson for 4 years. I was a rotational guy. I averaged about 4 points a game. There's, no agents taking me, no European teams taking me, so on and so forth. So I was just fortunate enough to have a friend in Brussels, Belgium, and got the opportunity to go over there and try out for a team. And I tried out for the team, and I didn't make it. And I refused to come home basically because, like I said, I had this inferiority complex. So, and it just the places I went, it just living in northern Bergen County where it's affluent just fueled that inferiority complex. Then I go to Davidson College where now it's like I'm this basketball player that's not that good and just rotational guy. And now I'm at a place where the wealth is off the charts. Like, kids are there driving $100,000 cars. It's a, really, really expensive, So now I'm in that culture and I'm like, I'm not smart. I'm not good at basketball. And I don't have any fancy clothes or I don't have a car. And now it's just like, I really feel like, uh, trash, to be honest with you. That's how I felt. Like I was just a nobody. Then I go overseas, and I become somebody a little bit at Davidson, my junior and senior year. Then I go overseas, and then again, it's like I get knocked on my ass, and I go over there and try out. And my parents didn't want me to go, and my dad's afraid to fly, and he watches the news too much. And I'm going to this other country, and all these other things. I'm like, I'm going, so I didn't make the team. And through a friend, I got a job as a janitor at a international school there, and the maintenance staff that I was on. I'm so grateful to those people. And they spoke French, so they were yelling at me all the time. I have no idea what they were talking about. And then I became a janitor because the janitor has the keys to the gym. So I got the keys to the gym, and I got to go in at 5 in the morning or 4 in the morning or anytime I want. I kind of slept in the school there, and did that for about 11 months. There's a moment there where there was a flood in the basement, and none of the other guys they had seniority over me. They didn't want to clean out the flood, and it was like a septic tank kind of thing. So I was down there with a water pump. I didn't know how to use. I'm not a handyman at all. I know it sounds weird because I'm working on the maintenance staff at an international school. But I'm down here, and nothing's going well in this basement. And the head guy comes down screaming at me in French, some other stuff. I don't know idea what he's talking about. And but I will tell you that smell has never left me. The smell in my nose has never left. And honestly, quite frankly, it's really driven me. There's moments to where it's just like I was literally cleaning up shit, and it drove me to be successful, not just as a coach, but hopefully as a husband and a father. Um, I don't want my kids to have to be that person. So, but anyway, long story short, I wouldn't come home because I was embarrassed, and everybody knew that I would get cut. And I stayed there and did all that stuff. I trained. I met this guy who was a high jumper in the Olympics, and he trained me and for free. I had no money, so he trained me for free, and I worked sometimes 3 times, training in the morning before work and working as a janitor, and then training with him at night. He was from the Russian school of training, so it was like serious. And I committed to him for 3 years, and I couldn't get out of bed some days, and I had to go to work, so couldn't move my legs. It was every day I'd show up, and he's like, "All right, we're doing squats today and box jumps," and then the next day squats and box jumps. So for 3 years, I was doing squats and box jumps. Anyway, but after that first year, I did try out for another team, and I did make it. And I don't want to say the rest is history, but it kind of was. I played for 3 years there in Belgium, and then I left and went and played in Kosovo. That was another life-changing experience for me. And I basically just took the money because they paid me twice as much.
I love that journey, and just it obviously translated to what you've been able to build here now that you took over, and not only started your own youth basketball club, but have really kind of transformed Bergen Catholic into a national kind of powerhouse. To be honest with you, it's a incredible program and highly successful. And you turned Bergen around pretty quickly. And I was kind of curious, if you were to write kind of a guidebook. I'm sure everything you did wasn't great, but I'm sure there were some great things that you did that were obviously led to some of the success of you building up that program. So if you're writing a guidebook for other coaches that are looking to really, grow their program, what would be some of the big things that you'd put in that?
You got to really sit down with yourself and evaluate yourself, like who you are. And really get down to the core of like who you are and just like what you really truly believe in. And then once you know what that is, you get that down on paper, and then you have to live by it. and you have to live it every day in your conversations and everything that you do. You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna mess up every day, like I do. But you really need to get that. You really need to get that down, and that's got to be so ingrained in you. And and as JP knows, for us, it's TCC and trust, care, and commitment. But you get that so ingrained in you because that's what you're going to build your program on, your core values. And then as soon as you do that, it all sounds cool, and you get that down on paper. You put it on a T-shirt, and then I think it's just life's way and the universe's way of really testing you to help you grow and get stronger. Everybody's going to come out of the woodwork and is going to challenge you on those core values, which ultimately my core values is who I am as a man, as a husband and father. So I'm going to get challenged on that. So you got to do that. You need to have that in play. And then the other thing, you do have to have a philosophy of play. You do need to have the basketball stuff. Like, what's your philosophy? Even though that's tweaking and changing all the time, you just has to have a way of playing. You know, and sometimes I get it from high school coaches that are public school coaches. It's like, well, I don't get to choose my guys each year, but I still think you create an identity, a playing style around your program and stuff, and then it attracts public school kids to stay at their public school. I think Lance Wahlberg did it for years with his style, and like everybody knew what he was doing there. So, but it really starts with you finding out who you are, what you believe in, who you are as a human being, your core values, and then you do need obviously the basketball philosophy part of it.
Really, when you're building a program and you've taken something and now built it to a high level of success, national rankings, as JP mentioned before, I often think in the beginning, the needs of your program and your players are different maybe than what they are as you're building, if that makes sense. Like you're trying to establish a foundation, you get some momentum, and then as you kind of start to experience some breakthroughs, it feels different for the coach. It feels different for the players, right? There's a different kind of pressure. There's a target on your back. What was that journey like for you as you were building it at Bergen?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is I think most coaches go through, and it almost scares me to think back to a certain degree, because I go through this every year. Like at the end of this season, like we had a pretty good season this year, and I'm going back evaluating myself, and I'm like, this is only one. Like I'm like, what was I thinking? Like what was this? Like I mean, I think like each year it's like I felt like I was a really bad coach the year before. So now if I go back, I finished my 11th season. So now if I go back to year one, year two, it's really like, what was this guy, what was this guy thinking or whatever. So, but the one thing that I got better at, but the one thing I did stay true to, as I go back and think about it or whatever, was that I did stay true to the fact of it's about the players. This is not about me. It's about how can I help them. And it's the one thing Coach Mckillop always taught me. It was like, it's a big mantra in our program. It's like when you help somebody, you're actually helping yourself. So like in basketball, the screener's always open. So your willingness to sacrifice, and the better screen I set for Nate, the more my defender is going to have to help on this Nate, of Nate's cut. And now I get open. So that was really the thing that was like constant throughout, was just like, how can I help my players? How can I help? So even though the way I helped them my first few years was different, because I had one kid that went on to play Division III college basketball in my first year, and the rest of them were just off going on to school. They weren't going to play basketball anymore. But it was still my job to help them. It helped them in the game of basketball, which ultimately is life, and help them in school and all of those things. So it's just how I help them now. Just I guess the conversation's changed a little bit now, because it's like instead of helping a kid get to college, it's now helping a kid to where he's prepared to play at the Division I college level. So I think that it's different from like what we're talking about, but the level of help and care is like still there.
I've got a really challenging question I'm going to ask you here. You mentioned earlier you had this inferiority complex as an athlete, when you mentioned why, it was, really, really powerful. You and I both know that our own personal struggles, where in life, they affect our leadership, right? They affect the way that we lead and we coach. So how has that challenged you as a coach? How is that inferiority complex from some of your earlier life experiences? How's that manifested in your coaching journey and, been a challenge for you?
Because I've spent a lot of games coaching mad, and you can't coach mad, and it's just And why were you mad? Like, well, because it was the inferiority or it was my ego. Now we're playing in this gym and my team's losing and my team doesn't look good. So now I'm a terrible coach. I think a lot of times when the coaches do the yelling, the blaming, the shaming, all of those things, it's because it's about the coach and his ego, and now he's worried about how he looks, and that was a big thing for our team this year, and our two biggest fears, and one of them is that we're always worried about I'm not good enough, and then the other fear that human beings all have is the fear of what other people think of me. So you have the inferiority complex combined with now I decide to be a basketball coach and I get the opportunity and I'm blessed with the opportunity to be a head coach. So now I'm the guy standing while the lights are on, going up and down the sidelines. So everybody sees me. And now my team's not very good. So I must be a bad coach. And, I also identified myself early on as a coach. And, it made me coach mad, to be honest with you, a lot of times. And it had nothing to do with my players. It had everything to do with me and my ego.
And what would you say are some ways that you've tried to work through that? I think because I think a lot of us as coaches can relate to that experience and relate to those challenges of coaching out of fear, from a place of fear instead of coaching from where we aspire to be, which is from a place of love, and care for the players.
Yeah. I think it's like it's intention. It's pregame pregame work with the pregame work you do with yourself, the pre-practice work you do with yourself. Like every coach carries their game cards, and I have a game card too. I don't look at the X's and O's in the plays, but I had the reminders to self written on the bottom of my game card, and the two big reminders, and they change from game to game, but it's really my cheat sheet because, basketball is such an emotional game because like John Wooden, I think, said it best. Like everybody sits close. The kids are wearing the pajamas. The lights are bright. Everybody knows who made the mistake, who messed up. My wife goes to the Bergen Catholic High School football games with me. She has no idea where the football is. Like she's sitting in the bleachers. Like there's a track that's around it. I got guys that sit in my timeout essentially at our gym. So it really is this really emotional game, and it's emotional for the kids and parents because everybody knows who kind of messes up. So on my game card, like I have these reminders at the bottom, and that's really what I look at. And they're just their reminders. And the two biggest ones, there's one, you can't coach mad. So like that's a way that I've really worked on it. It's like reminding myself in the emotional crisis where now I'm pissed and that it's starting to feel like, I'm looking bad here. My team is, what's people going to think of me? That fear starts to come up. So I literally stop myself while the game's going on and read that. Like you can't coach mad. The other one that's always on there that really helps me is that every kid I coach is somebody's pride and joy. And so we're in this critical point of a game and, I'm starting to, you're starting to get the blood pressures getting up and then I'll pull out my game card and it's like every kid you coach is somebody's pride and joy. And that really just stops me in my tracks. And I try to keep that at the front of my mind all the time, no matter what's going on in the game. This is somebody's child here. And I learned that lesson from Coach Mckillop, quite frankly, because I had some conversations with him after I played for him. Now that the real relationship starts, the cool relationships that you get with coach, where you don't have that coach to player thing. And coach talked to me very candidly about, things changed for him because he apologizes to the guys he coached in the 90s because he was brutal on us, almost the Bobby Knight stuff. And it was when he coached his first son at Davidson, Matt Mckillop, who's now the associate head coach there, I think things started to change for him. And my conversations with him really helped me. So those two concepts, you can't coach mad, and that everybody I coach is somebody's pride and joy. It puts the emphasis on them and not my, ego.
All right, that's it for part one. Next episode, we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of how Billy has made significant changes in his coaching and his culture. You're not going to want to miss it. So be sure, if you haven't already, to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts.